I was halfway up the stairs, a stack of clean towels balanced in my arms, when Daniel's voice floated down from the landing. "Don't go upstairs, Mom, it's messy." Light tone, almost a joke. But there was something hard underneath it, like a door slamming quietly. I froze, one foot on the next step. The kind of freeze your body learns after decades of reading between the lines. He turned away before I could answer. I heard his office door click shut. The towels felt heavier than they were. I stood there for another minute, then carried them back to the guest room, the one he'd insisted I use while he fixed up the house. My safe was up there, tucked into the corner of his old bedroom. He'd told me it was safer on the second floor. Out of sight. I'd believed him. I'd always believed him. A week earlier, when I'd moved in, I'd brought that safe in the trunk of my car. It wasn't much: my late husband's watch, a few pieces of gold jewelry, the deed to my house, and a thin folder of documents no one else needed to see. Things that didn't belong in a bank. Things that belonged to me. That afternoon the house emptied. Daniel had errands. His wife was at her yoga class. Silence pressed in from every wall. I found myself at the bottom of the stairs again. My knees protested, but I climbed slowly, careful not to make the floorboards creak. At the top, the hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something stale. My safe sat where I'd left it, small, gray, ordinary. I keyed in the code. The lock clicked. Inside was nothing. No watch. No jewelry. No papers. Just a pale square of dust where an envelope had been. I stared for a long time, my heartbeat strangely steady. There's a moment when you stop being shocked, when the hurt is so clean it almost feels like clarity. I closed the safe, locked it again. Not to protect what was gone, that was already lost, but to keep the truth in place until I decided what to do with it. They didn't just take what was mine, I thought, stepping back into the hallway. They took the last reason I had to stay. That was the first crack. The rest would follow. A week before, when Daniel called and said, "Why don't you stay here for a while, Mom? Until the contractor finishes your kitchen?" I'd said yes before thinking. My place was a mess of dust sheets and sawdust, and the idea of being around family for a few weeks sounded comforting. I packed slowly over 2 days. Clothes, my medications, a couple of paperbacks, and the safe. Always the safe. I wrapped my late husband's watch in a handkerchief, tucked my jewelry in the small felt pouch he'd bought me years ago. My important documents went in last. I remember running my hand over the cool metal door before locking it. That sound, that solid click, had always meant peace of mind. When I pulled into Daniel's driveway, his wife, Melissa, opened the door. She smiled, but it was the polite kind, not the warm kind. "We put you in the guest room downstairs," she said, "but we'll keep your safe upstairs. Out of sight, you know?" I hesitated for half a second. Downstairs felt more mine. But I nodded, because that's what I do. "Of course," I said. Daniel carried it upstairs before I could change my mind. That first evening I made dinner. Roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes the way Daniel liked them when he was a boy. He scrolled through his phone during most of the meal. Melissa complimented the chicken, but in a way that felt like she was checking a box. The rest of the week blurred into quiet errands and polite small talk. Melissa worked late. Daniel spent hours in his office. Sometimes I'd hear them laughing together upstairs after I'd gone to bed. I told myself it was fine, that they had their own lives. But little things began to catch my attention. A drawer in the hallway I'd closed was open the next day. My bedroom door slightly ajar in the morning. Once I found my tote bag unzipped, though I was sure I'd closed it. I brushed it off. People forget. Doors shift in old houses. Looking back, it wasn't forgetfulness. It was preparation. They don't tell you, I thought. That betrayal often wears the face of routine. And now I knew the week had been less about hosting me, and more about moving the pieces into place. Standing in that upstairs hallway with the empty safe still cooling under my fingertips, I noticed something I hadn't before. A thin film of dust lined the top shelf inside. If the safe had been opened recently, there would have been smudges, marks from fingers or movement. But it was undisturbed, like nothing had been in there for weeks. This wasn't new. This wasn't sudden. I knelt down, knees complaining, and ran my hand across the base. No drag marks from heavy items being lifted recently. Whoever had taken the contents hadn't done it while I was staying here. They'd done it before I even arrived. That thought sat in my chest like a stone. I closed the safe, turned the lock, and stepped into Daniel's old bedroom. It was too tidy for the mess he'd warned me about. The bed was made. A single stack of folded shirts sat on the dresser. The closet door hung open just an inch. I shouldn't have, but I pulled it open. On the top shelf, a familiar envelope peeked out from beneath a sweater. My handwriting. I took it down empty. Just like the safe. Whoever had emptied it didn't even bother to throw away the evidence. Back downstairs, I heard the front door open. Daniel's voice carried through the house, chatting to someone on speakerphone. I slipped the envelope into my cardigan pocket and moved quietly to the guest room. In my mind, scenes started to stitch themselves together. The week-old conversation where Melissa asked if I really needed to keep my jewelry here. Daniel's casual comment about old paperwork not being worth much. The way they kept me busy downstairs every afternoon. They didn't forget, I thought. They rehearsed. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to Daniel's footsteps overhead. No confrontation yet. No raised voice, no demand for an explanation. I needed to be certain before I said a word. That's the thing about betrayal, you only get one chance to respond. And I wasn't going to waste mine on outrage. If they had a plan without me, I could have one without them. The next morning I woke before the sun. The house was still, the kind of stillness that almost hums in your ears. I dressed without turning on a light, slid the empty envelope deeper into my bag, and made my way to the front door. No note. No noise. I walked until my knees protested. Then another block past that. The air was sharp with late autumn cold, enough to make my eyes water. I found myself in front of a small park I'd passed dozens of times but never entered. Today I did. I sat on a damp wooden bench, my hands wrapped around the strap of my bag. The truth sat with me like an uninvited guest. Across the path, a man tossed a ball for his dog. A woman in a red scarf stopped to adjust her coffee cup lid. Life moved unaware. They didn't just take things, I thought. They took the last illusion that I mattered to them. It would have been easy to go back, slam the safe door in front of Daniel, demand an apology. But I'd learned something about people. When they can do this to you quietly, they can deny it just as quietly. And they will. I stayed on that bench for an hour, letting the cold settle into my bones until it felt like armor. I thought about every holiday I'd hosted, every check I'd written, just until things got better, every babysitting emergency. A jogger slowed as he passed me. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked. I met his eyes. "I'm fine. Just choosing my next place to be." He nodded like he understood, but I knew he couldn't. By the time I stood up, my mind was set. I wasn't going back to that guest room to sit under their roof and pretend nothing had shifted. I walked 2 more blocks to a bus stop. The metal bench was cold, but it felt more honest than any chair in Daniel's house. When the bus arrived, I stepped on without looking back. Not leaving in a storm, not slamming a door, just removing myself from the stage. I'm not leaving, I thought. I'm just not returning. I got off the bus near a strip of small shops, a bakery, a hardware store, a coffee place with steamed-up windows. My fingers were stiff from the cold, so I ducked inside for warmth. The cafe was half empty, the kind of place where the tables still bore faint coffee rings no one bothered to wipe. A young barista with tired eyes took my order, black coffee, no sugar. While I waited, I pulled my phone from my bag. There was one notification from my bank. First, I thought it was a balance update. Then I saw the line item. A transfer, nearly the exact amount I'd had in cash in the safe. The date was 2 weeks ago, before I moved in. The recipient's name was familiar. A friend of Daniel's who once asked me, half joking, to invest in his startup. The barista set the coffee down in front of me. "Cold out there," she said. "Colder inside some houses," I answered without thinking. She gave me a quick, curious look but didn't press. I stared at the transaction, my thumb hovering over the call button. But I didn't dial the bank. Not yet. I didn't need confirmation of what I already knew. They'd prepared for this. It wasn't a crime of impulse. A memory surfaced. Daniel a year ago asking why I still kept my jewelry. When you never wear it. His laugh when I said some things aren't for wearing. Melissa chiming in about simplifying my life. I'd taken those moments as harmless chatter. Now they read like trial balloons testing what I'd notice, what I'd defend. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter, almost medicinal. The kind of taste that doesn't pretend to be anything else. I liked it more for that. They didn't just take my things, I thought. They took the question of whether I'd ever trust them again, and answered it for me. I slid the phone back into my bag. I didn't want to call. I wanted to plan. Not a confrontation, not a scene, a clean severing. I'd been a background figure in their lives for years. It was time to cut the cord they thought would hold me forever. I left the cafe without finishing the coffee. It had done its job, warmed my hands, sharpened my focus. At the corner, I stopped in front of a payphone booth converted into a public bulletin board. Among the flyers for piano lessons and pet sitting was the card I needed. A small white rectangle with law offices of Carter and Dean printed in clean black type. I slipped it into my pocket. Back at the bus stop, I dialed from my cell. The receptionist's voice was bright and efficient. "I need to update my will," I said. "And I'd like an appointment as soon as possible." "We have an opening tomorrow at 10, she replied. "I'll take it." I hung up and let the phone rest in my lap. No dramatics. No long explanations. Just movement. Next, I opened the banking app. Not to check balances. I already knew what I'd lost. But to move the remaining funds into an account Daniel didn't know existed. One I'd kept dormant since before his wedding. I transferred every last dollar. A man in a heavy coat sat down beside me, glancing at the phone in my hand. "Bad news?" he asked. "No," I said, sliding the phone into my bag. "Just finalizing some things." When the bus arrived, I rode to the end of the line. A neighborhood I hadn't seen in years. I walked past thrift stores and laundromats until I found a quiet motel with a vacancy sign glowing red in the window. The man at the front desk slid a key toward me without small talk. "Room 12. I paid cash. Inside, the room smelled faintly of cleaning solution and something older. One bed, one chair, a small desk under a buzzing lamp. I unpacked nothing. Just sat on the edge of the bed with my coat still on, listening to the low hum of the heater. They think I'll come back, I thought. They think this is a pause. It's not. That night I slept without dreams. Not because I was at peace, but because my mind had already crossed the threshold. Tomorrow the paper trail would begin. And by the time they noticed, it would already be too late. Morning light leaked through the thin motel curtains, turning the walls a muted gold. I showered, dressed in the one decent blouse I'd brought, and walked to a small diner I'd spotted the night before. The bell above the door jingled. Inside smelled of bacon grease and burnt toast. A waitress with silver hair and a coffee pot in hand looked me over with that practiced glance of someone who's seen every kind of story walk in. "Table or booth?" she asked. "Booth," I said. She poured me coffee without asking. "You from around here?" "Used to be," I said. She studied me a moment longer, then smiled faintly. "You look like someone who finally picked herself." The words landed heavier than I expected. I stirred sugar into my coffee, not to sweeten it, but to give my hands something to do. "Maybe I did," I said quietly. She nodded, as if that was all the answer she needed, and moved on to the next table. I ordered eggs and toast, ate slowly, and watched the street through the fogged window. People hurried past with bags and coffees, faces tucked into scarves. None of them knew me. None of them owed me anything. It was oddly comforting. When I went to pay, the waitress slid the bill toward me and leaned in just enough to keep her voice low. "Wherever you came from, you don't look like you're going back." "I'm not," I said. No explanation. No apology. Outside, the cold air bit at my cheeks. I walked to the corner, where a bus idled with its door open. The driver, a man in his 50s with kind eyes, tilted his head toward me. "You lost." "No," I said, stepping aboard. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." I sat halfway back, watching the city shift outside the window, storefronts giving way to quiet residential streets. The motion of the bus felt like something loosening in my chest. They don't know it yet, I thought, but I've already disappeared from their lives. And I'm not coming back for the encore. The bus turned toward downtown, carrying me closer to the appointment that would seal it all. The law office was on the 4th floor of a brick building with no elevator. I climbed slowly, gripping the rail, each step deliberate. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and coffee. A receptionist in a navy sweater took my name, then motioned me toward a small waiting area. While I sat, my phone buzzed in my bag. Daniel's name lit the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. "Mom, where are you?" His tone was sharp, not worried. "Somewhere you won't need to hide the key from me," I said. My voice was even, almost flat. A pause. "What are you talking about?" "You know." He started to say more, but I ended the call. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing worth salvaging in that conversation. A door opened, and a man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses stepped out. "Mrs. Harper?" "Yes." "I'm Alan Carter. Let's talk in my office." The room was orderly, lined with law books and framed degrees. I laid out what I wanted. Remove Daniel as beneficiary, direct all assets to a trust for my granddaughter, with conditions. Alan took notes without judgment. "Do you want to notify him?" he asked. "No," I said. "Let him find out when it matters." An hour later, the paperwork was signed. The changes were real, immediate. As I stepped back onto the street, the sky had turned a brittle winter blue. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. "Mom, this is ridiculous. Come home." I typed, then erased, then finally sent one line. "You're calling it home. I'm calling it over." I turned the phone off and slid it into my bag. Around me, traffic moved, people hurried past, the world went on. But for me, something had stopped and something else had started. They'll search for the argument, I thought. But there isn't one. There's only the silence after someone stops showing up. I crossed the street toward the bus stop, the papers in my bag feeling lighter than they should. Back at the motel, I locked the door and drew the curtains. The heater rattled faintly, filling the silence with a mechanical heartbeat. I set the envelope of legal papers on the desk and sat beside it, letting the reality settle. By now, they would have called twice, maybe 3 times. I reached for my phone, powered it on long enough to see the flood of missed calls and unread messages. Daniel. Melissa. Even my granddaughter, likely prompted by them. One voicemail from Daniel started mid-sentence, his voice tight. "Don't understand why you're doing this. We can fix it if you'll just come back." They weren't asking me to return. They were asking for access. I deleted the message. Another text from Melissa. "You're making a big mistake. This will ruin the family." I almost laughed. Family, I thought, isn't supposed to be something you can loot and lock out. I placed the phone back on the desk, still on, just to watch the notifications stack up like waves breaking on a seawall. By evening, I turned it off again. In the quiet, I thought about the last decade. Every time I'd driven hours to babysit on short notice, every loan that was just temporary, every time I'd stayed silent to keep the peace. I realized something sharp and simple. They had mistaken my presence for permission, and permission was no longer on offer. The trust papers were secure in my bag. The bank account was beyond their reach. My address for now was unknown to them. They'll look for me, I thought. But they'll be searching in the wrong places, the ones they control. I stepped outside into the chill night air, walking to the edge of the parking lot. The street was quiet, save for a distant hum of traffic. Somewhere out there, my old life still existed, the house, the routines, the invisible chains. But I wasn't part of it anymore. They hadn't exiled me. I'd left. And the difference between those two things was everything. 2 mornings later, I was sitting at a small kitchen table in a second-floor walk-up, a place I'd found through the motel clerk's cousin. The rent was low, the neighborhood quiet. From the window, I could see the tops of bare trees and the corner bakery with its hand-painted sign. The landlord, a woman named Marlene, had handed me the keys without fuss. "Month to month is fine," she'd said. "You look like you'll take care of the place." Now sunlight spilled across the table, warming the chipped ceramic mug between my hands. The coffee was strong and plain, the way I'd always liked it. I unpacked slowly over those first days. A few clothes in the closet, a stack of books by the bed. No framed photos. No safe. What little I had left was stored in a single locked drawer in the kitchen, not because I feared losing it, but because I no longer cared about guarding things in the same way. My phone stayed off in the drawer. Whatever was waiting on it could stay there. The absence of its buzz felt like a quiet I hadn't realized I needed. From the bakery below, the smell of fresh bread drifted up. Somewhere in the building, someone was playing an old piano, halting but steady. Life here moved in smaller, gentler shapes. I thought of Daniel and Melissa, of the inevitable moment they'd realize I was gone for good. They'd wonder why I hadn't explained, why I hadn't given them the fight they were ready for. But that was the point. Fights are for people who still want a way back in. They'll call it cutting me out, I thought. But it was me who walked away. I took another sip of coffee, the heat grounding me in the moment. Outside, the street was beginning to stir. A delivery truck, a woman with a stroller, a man unlocking his bike. Sometimes love is loud, messy, full of words. And sometimes it's just the moment you stop explaining yourself to people who were never listening. I set my mug down and let the sunlight reach my face. I didn't forgive, I thought. I just turned down the volume. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.